we thought about this as a bit of a fireside chat, if you will. So ordinarily, I think Todd likes to call this the splash zone. You may be burned horribly up here today when we get the campfire started. So apologies in advance. And it's lovely that you're here. And we've locked the doors so that you'll stay here. So ignore all the exit advice that Charles gave you earlier. What we're hoping to do is we've picked 6 ideas. That's as high as I can count on account of being from Kansas. So we picked 6 ideas. They're all good ideas. They're well-meaning ideas, but maybe they're incomplete, either in the design or the execution in an organization. And so our job, I think today, if we do this right, is to go through a few of those ideas, hopefully offer something that helps to complete those, and then lean on you all for a bit of help with choosing the rest. So we'll do 3, and then I think what happens is Brian Hughes will tell us what else to do, as he sometimes does. But you have lightsabers. Charles has some sort of weaponized microphones back there. So if you lightsaber, he'll throw you this mic, and our social contract here today will be, we'll do some talking, and then our hope is that you'll also do some talking. Or the threat is uninterrupted eye contact for the remainder of the 50 minutes. And it's already getting weird. So here's 6 ideas. If we've counted these out, and I think the first 3 that we're going to aim for is see something, say something. Dave's going to take that one to start. Ron, you're going to do maybe local expertise. Okay, Ron's our local expert. Thanks, and then I'm going to take on best practice a little bit. So, and we'll see if we can moderate this effectively. And then, pretty please, test it. Who's got lightsabers? Would you just kind of, I want to make sure we can see. There we go. So this side of the room doing almost too well, and a little bit of struggling here. We'll get there. There it goes. Okay. Look, take it easy. It's too much. So yeah, raise those if you've got something that you'd like to know or to correct us with. And I think we ought to kick it off.
I think we should.
Dave, I'm going to hand it to you.
So see something, say something. We've had this idea in safety about trying to create a reporting culture. And it's been talked about by a lot of safety theorists. Professor Andrew Hopkins talks about it. Sidney Dekker talks about it. The original HRO theorists in the 80s talked a lot about creating this climate and even culture, if you like, in your organization where people can raise their hand and say, this isn't right, or I see something, and I'm prepared to sort of share that with management, with the organization, and you know, a reporting culture as being a really healthy part of an overall safety culture. And we know through the research that there's actually a lot of barriers for people to actually do this, to actually put their hand up and say, I'm seeing something different to everyone else in this organization, it appears, and I'm going to stick my neck out and I'm going to share that with the organization without knowing how the organization is going to respond and what it might mean for me individually. So in 2005, when the UK Ministry of Defence had their Nimrod air-to-air, which Nimrod in terms of the aircraft,
sure,
not the derogatory Nimrod term.
Not wrong.
I thought it was my turn.
No, not that Nimrod. But they had this air-to-air refueling disaster, and Lord Haddon Cave, barrister, lawyer, sort of did the parliamentary inquiry. And he looked at all of these ideas around reporting culture, and he sort of said that that he feels the push for a reporting culture was sort of an abdication of leadership responsibility, and that we shouldn't be creating a culture of expecting people to report. We should be creating a culture of expecting managers and functional leaders like health and safety teams and engineers to have a questioning culture of actually going out proactively and asking questions and getting that information long before it gets to the point of someone needing to go, this is really bad now, I'm going to report it. And I think that's, in terms of this first idea of see something, say something, it might be incomplete of the sense of where we're putting the responsibility in our organization and, you know, where we maybe should be putting that responsibility. Thoughts?
We shockingly talked about this beforehand. And one of the things that we talked about, and you hear a lot of times in organizations, is this open door policy. Have you heard? Is it just me? Okay. It's part of the social contract, is that we talk with one another, right? Or Ron just stares at you the whole time. So if you've heard, right, open door policy, and you go, okay, that's great. If it's open, get your ass out of it, right? Walk out of that door. That's now, instead of an abdication of, as Dave said, of leadership, it's saying, look, I've got some obligation to go learn from stories. And there's a lot going on about storytelling and understanding stories and how normal work is happening. We're talking about this idea of story learning, not just storytelling. And that's not something I think that most leaders have the tools for naturally. I think that's teachable, like it is for any of us. And so when I look at that as incomplete, what I generally think of is, look, we're sort of leaving these poor folks hanging and expecting through magical thinking that our leaders know how to solicit that information about normal work.
Yeah, and I think there's a really good paper from Jaap Havinga out of your lab way over there, wherever the hell that is, on stop work, which I think is very related. And one of the things I have a problem with a lot of the see something, say something mentalities is it localizes the problem in the individuals. We need to convince them that it's okay to talk, right? We need to make them feel more courage. Whereas one of the things Jaap found in his work was it was actually much more structural. Like stop work happens all the time, much more often than you recognize. And when it doesn't happen is when people don't see that there are resources to solve the problem. So part of the leadership responsibility is not just, hey, I need to make you feel comfortable. Yes, psychological safety matters. It's really important. It is insufficient to get the kind of reporting that you're looking for. You need to give people space. You need to have resources. You need to have capacity to help them resolve the problems that they're dealing with in their work environment. And if you're not actively trying to find and solve those problems and creating the ability to find and solve those problems, that's going to also contribute to a lack of reporting. And it may have nothing to do with courage.
So if I go home, and I will, I promise. Yeah, promise. If I go home and now I'm trying to do something that's a bit better than just build that culture of reporting and comfort and psychological safety. So I think a lot of us are doing that. We're working hard at that. But maybe the output, the actual information isn't getting to us. So what can I do? What can I do to make that better? I'm staring at you.
You want me to answer that? Or
sure.
Dave
No, fantastic. Yeah. Do it as sort of a song together.
A duet.
Great. Yeah.
Okay. 3, 2, 1.
Oh, boy.
No, so my opinion, and Dave, I would love to hear your thoughts too, but so I think step one and the lesson from Jaap's paper is that this idea of stop work, this idea of see something, say something is structurally and implicitly connected to the work. So step one, you have to understand how people are getting work done. What are the challenges they're facing? What are the pressures, the constraints, the difficulties? And then once you understand that, then you can start to, okay, what are the resources that they need? And how can we ensure that A, they are recognized that those resources are available, and B, that they actually are available when they need it? Because that's what the research found, is that when people did recognize that, when they said, okay, I'm having an issue with this work, let me stop what I'm doing because I know I can call this person to come help me. It was only when they didn't know that resource was available, or that it wasn't available, they knew it wasn't available, that they decided to push forward because they knew the work had to get done.
Is start work authority, which you hear sometimes people talking about,
That's the thing.
is that related to, we talk about stop work and see something, say something, is start work authority
Sure, I think
part of that?
I think that these ideas are all connected about, how does work go in the way that we want work to go, and how does it continue to go in the way that we would like it to go I think in terms of this as an incomplete idea, like we said at the start, well-intentioned, which is great. Tell all of your employees in your organization that, hey, if you do see something, say something. This is how you do it, and this is what support you'll have. But supplement that employee broadcast message around see something, say something. To quote you, Ben, in our prep is, but also make sure you've got a really clear program with your management about ask something, learn something, about the work that your people do. Because I think it's that if leaders are role modeling that humble inquiry and that questioning and that desire to learn and understand about their people, and creating the environment where when they do learn something, they respond really well to both good and bad news, then it'll be circular.
Cyclical?
Yeah. And that will actually make the see something, say something actually more impactful because of all the things that Ron had said. So it must be time to get some questions, right?
Is it? Oh, we got a question. Of course.
Oh, there we go.
Brian.
That's right. This
Everybody,
this will be good.
This
This will be good.
guy.
Yeah, this is a shocker.
This is-
Please talk into the box.
New Dr. Ben.
I guess I should ask James Newman first. What's in the box, James? There you are, buddy. All right, fellas. So I have a question about when you said, Ben, you said get out the door is open. I have an open door policy. I'm going to now walk out that door and I'm going to get out to I'm going to go down there. I'm going to see what's happening. And that's not exactly a popular move sometimes for the leader to show up on the work floor. And then I was
Part of the wellness program.
yeah. Well, and Ron, who I've talked to a bunch about this is a guy I think you know real well is Ian Small from Mortensen. And Ian, that's what he said. He's like, Brian, I got to get out there. I got to go. I see my job as the safety director is not the guy who's trying to catch them, but the guy who's trying to help them get the job done and get the job done safely. So I use Ian as kind of my mark of, a good job of getting out there and asking questions. But I don't know that everybody's like Ian. And I don't know that even a well-intentioned boss who took that advice would find credibility and, at least not right away. So it can take some courage on the part of the leader to actually go out there and say, hey guys, I really do just want to help. I'm not trying to catch you.
So, and some courage and some prep. Right. And, we focus so much on educating folks when we say that are out doing the work, and we have this really strong bias toward the front line. But your leaders are also doing work, right? They're in the midst of doing work and they're doing the best that they can with what they know. Well, if they don't know how to get out and connect with people, or what sort of questions make sense, or how to put people at ease in that situation and not just make a total mess of it, then to Brian's point, things won't get better and they may get worse.
I think we just covered the management by walking.
Yeah.
Without realizing it.
Thanks, Brian.
Twofer.
So here's my question. We talk about stop work, which is critical to our success. But when I'm in the field and I'm talking with the guys, a lot of times we use the word stop when unsure, and they say, Galen, man, I wasn't unsure. I would have stopped. But you don't know what you don't know. I thought I understood, and that's why I didn't stop. And then it goes sideways and somebody has a really bad accident or something. So what do you do about something like that?
I won't take long. I don't have a lot of smart things to say, but this whole see something, say something, I think we have to define what something is. And there's a lot of times when we're out doing work and we feel certain. These guys have heard some good stories of me being at work, being certain something was going to go well.
Triple fall.
Yep. So, but I don't think that uncertainty and risk and fear of something or something, those aren't always the some things that we want people to talk about, even in those small groups. And so, your mileage may vary, but I think thinking critically about what something is when we're asking people to report it is important.
Well, and I think, that really hits it. The point I would make, because if our goal is to achieve certainty, then all work will stop because there is no certain work. it's just not possible. You're not even certain necessarily that this room's going to hold, right? Like the building could collapse above us because none of us
Thank
checked
you.
it. Yeah.
Really sunny
No,
out.
it's a good
so-
thing we locked the doors. No, but like seriously, like you go back to Cook, how complex systems fail, complex adaptive systems fail. And all behavior is essentially an experiment. Because we can't predict the future. So we have to help people resolve and cope with that complexity. And part of that is to help them know what to look for, but then give them strategies, for those unforeseen events, those challenges, because we can't expect them to be perfect.
I think we've got maybe one more question on this one. I'm a little worried about this side of the room. I know you had the lightsabers. You need to talk to a friend and sort of,
Well, this is the smart side. They already got it.
the ringers are all over here. Sorry, go ahead.
To me, to have a successful see something, say something process, you have to have a reaction plan. Because most of the time, the problem is you won't get people to say something. It's when there's no reaction to it and no follow-up and communication. Everybody understands you can't fix everything right in the moment, but there are a lot of things you can. And as long as I'm saying something and we're gonna keep following up on that, people will continue to say it. What happens so many times is that there isn't the follow-up. So if you're gonna try and promote something, you have to make sure you're fixing it also.
Yeah, and I like that you use the word follow-up, not necessarily fixing, because sometimes there's not a fix, but it's that fact of being heard and sort of understood.
Yeah, and I think to connect the ideas around defining what the something is, and the start work authority, I think it's really important to have these conversations about what are some of these things. So we're seeing organizations that do in their pre-start actually talking about, stop the job triggers and saying, okay, so throughout this work, we think it's going to go like this. What are the things that if they happen, we will be, replanning or readjusting or going to plan B or going to plan C. And, if the team comes up with 2 or 3 things, like if there's a person here, we're not expecting anyone to be here and that no one should be here. So if anyone sees a person in this area, we need to safely sort of adjust what we're doing. And having those conversations actually then creates that psychological safety for people to go, oh, actually, we've talked about all of these different reasons that we'd call something out today. And even if X, Y, Z happens that we didn't talk about, the person will still feel more okay to go, actually, I've got to, we've got to work this out together. So I think being very careful of these really point in time activities like start work, end work, see something, and trying to have a more continuous risk conversation throughout the work.
So we have like a real work is imagined, work is done conflict right now because you wanted to move
I
forward.
said 1,
And
and we're gonna go with 7.
are we going to adapt?
Yeah.
What are we doing, boss?
Let's do these 2.
These two and
because
then shut
it's a
up.
bit threatening with the blinking red lights. So we'll go 2. You can arm wrestle for who's.
I feel like a plane's about to land right from that direction.
All right,
Oh, it's
check,
changed.
check. Okay. Stop work authority tends to, well, at least it started around imminent danger, right? The idea of a graded approach might be a better way to talk about it. And I was wondering what you guys' thoughts are on that.
I don't hear that well. Is it a
Graded approach? Yeah, so
not
sure if-
low work authority.
I can't see Beth Lay in the room. Beth, you in the room? Ah, there you go, Beth. So Beth did some work with OSU and sort of came up with, I think, one of the best risk tools that I've seen in recent times is this idea of an uncertainty gauge. Because you're right, if there's imminent danger, it's clear and present. It's sort of obvious we'll stop. But this idea that Beth had implemented with a scale of 1 to 10, so the team can have a conversation about what is our level of uncertainty around this particular work. Is it a 7 or is it an 8? Okay, well, why do you think it's a 2? Why are you so confident? Why do you think it's an 8? And so I think work and risk is on a gradient and people will perceive that differently. So having some tools that might help draw out those different perspectives, like in that scenario, and I'd encourage everyone to talk to Beth about what she did with that, because I think that hopefully helps teams have a sort of a graded perception-based conversation before work and during the work as well.
Nailed it.
Maybe Bob.
Last but not least, when you say see something, say something, and I'm relating to another one of those boxes that you had on the opening slide as categories, is is saying nothing. Say something occurred and it was either a root cause or a contributing factor that somebody said didn't say something. Do you find that as a legitimate contributor to a bad outcome that we didn't say something, and how to resolve that?
I mean, my just first thought is the legitimacy is socially constructed, right? So whether like I think it's legitimate in my organization, I mean, if by legitimate we mean that's where we stop looking and that's where we stop asking questions, the answer would be unequivocally no. It would never be. It'd be something that's interesting that would spark curiosity and we'd want to understand more about. So, what are the pressures and the constraints that are contributing to something happening in a way that we didn't want it to happen? So that's the way I would treat it.
Yeah, and I think from a learning point of view, I think if it's part of sort of counterfactual reasoning, like we see in investigations where this work group failed to identify the hazard or they failed to do something, or we think that this team, because in hindsight, it's like, well, it was obvious that this was a bad thing to do and the team didn't say anything about it. If that's the assumption, then I don't think that's useful. But if we're actually working with our teams and talking and really trying to understand it, and people are telling us, yes, we did see that and we knew it wasn't safe and we didn't do anything about it, assuming they say something like that, then I think that's a great starting point for a really deep learning conversation about how why was it locally rational for them to not adjust their work. So I think
it ends up being a deeper issue than that, and it's not localized to that one incident because that's going to be a cultural thing, right?
Potentially.
And if you're doing that, because in RCA, we find that all the time is that, people knew about it, they reported it, and then nobody did anything. So then we just quit reporting it and we don't say anything.
And I think in terms of the research, and I think we'll move on. Whether it's see something, say something, or stopping work, or actually just sticking your neck out. What we do as an organisation matters. Almost it doesn't matter what the CEO says. It doesn't matter if people have lanyards hanging around their neck that the CEO's given them permission to do all of this. The single biggest impact is my direct manager, my frontline leader. Are they going to support me? How are they going to respond? Is it safe for me to work with them? So in a broader cultural context like that, I'd probably say this is a team by team, local leader led type of issue. And so we can't just broadcast this problem as employees report things or employees stop work. This is a leadership opportunity for our organizations.
Logan, I'm going to ask us to go back to the
Okay, thank you.
The six-pack.
Perfect.
Sweet.
There we go. And we said local expertise.
Is that my turn?
Yeah,
I think it's your turn.
It's the Ron show.
you're the local expert.
All right. Cue the music. Just kidding. No, so obviously, I think HOP is sort of taking over, this conference in a lot of ways. It's a lot of people are talking about, and one of the things you hear a lot about in HOP is this idea of local expertise, the masters of the blue line. People are the solution. And we should listen to the workers, like they are the experts. They're the subject matter experts. And yes, in effect, in a lot of ways they are. However, I think sometimes the narrative, and I'd be interested if you guys agree with this, is it starts to come across that, it used to be that managers are smart and workers are dumb. And now it's that managers are dumb and workers are smart. Yeah. And that is actually a fundamental misunderstanding of what we're talking about here, in my opinion. I think, we have to reorient. The problem is not that we have dumb people. The problem is that intelligence is not something that is uniform in all contexts. You can be really smart in one situation and really dumb in the next one. Why? Because of complexity. Because our work is messy. Our world is messy. And so you have people who have a perspective on that work, right? They are the local experts, right? But they can do things also that can cause reverberations within the system that could lead to future problems, right? There is no such thing as a free lunch. If we take complexity at its, on its face, there is no perfect system. There is no perfect leader, right? Dave Woods, actually in a paper I'll talk about later today,
Ending 2 weeks roughly.
and plus, yeah, it'll probably pop up. But he talked about all systems are simultaneously well adapted, under adapted, and maladapted. It's just relative to which goals, right? So you can't have someone who's an expert in all situations and all contexts. They'll have a piece of the puzzle, but other people do too, right?
Yeah. And there's sort of and I forget who said it. Maybe I've just made it up, but this idea that you can be both confident and scared at the same time. And I think that speaks to that too. And I always feel like it's a bit of an unpopular opinion, but I tend to give a lot of grace to leaders because they're local too, right? They're imagining work. Doesn't mean they're jerks. It means that they are separated necessarily from it. And if we think that people are the solution, not the problem, they are also presumably people. For now, I think there's a really varied experience in here. Really, yeah. I mean, they've been there, and tell me if this is your experience, or at least by nods. Is we tend to promote people beautifully based on technical expertise. Is it just me? Okay. So we take people who are really good at their job, and then we say, you're really good at digging holes in the earth. And we'd like you now to manage people because that's a natural extension of that work. That's bananas, right? And then we get angry because leaders don't magically get bestowed with the knowledge and the tools and the skill to understand this sort of stuff, and we're just mean to them. I think sometimes that's well earned, and sometimes they have an obligation to find that knowledge themselves and ask those questions. But I just don't think it's useful to push this idea of local expertise wholly to the front line.
I think something that hasn't been said maybe yet is that in the high reliability organization theory that I mentioned a bit earlier in the 80s, this idea of deference to expertise came up. But it was actually defined in that theory as expertise is a property of the group in a complex system. It's a property of everyone in that system. It's not an expert, it's expertise. And it was about the team. And I think to Ron, to your point about complex system is, everyone is an expert in how they do what they do. That doesn't mean that they are an expert in how it should be done or what all the risks are or the dependencies or other things. So local expertise needs to be a team effort.
And I think like these 2 points that popped in my head is that we often treat that managers create work as imagined and workers create work as done, but workers have their own work as imagined. Like every individual worker has their way of understanding how they do the work. That doesn't mean they understand all iterations of that work in all points in time. Right. So yes, that's an important, interesting, and critical perspective, but it's one perspective.
And I think the principle here, very, very well intended. I would say that this move in safety to actually think of the front line as being more active contributors to the design and the execution of successful work is a fantastic thing. And I think the limitation of this idea is that we can just go and talk to a worker or put them in a room for half an hour or 2 days with some sticky notes, and we can then know everything we need to know. And it's much harder. It's much harder than that.
So if we're taking this back and operationalizing it, is it as simple as, and I think it's a good step maybe, but those same questions that we ask to the front line, we ask of leaders and managers and supervisors, or is there more to take away?
I think we want to be very deliberate about what we're doing to understand how our organization functions. And how much time and effort and resources and processes do we have in place to actually understand how our organization does its work at every level. So it is very much the management level, but it's supply chain and engineering and planning and human resources and all these other functions, and do our best to understand how our system's functioning, recognizing that we'll never know, we'll never have a complete picture of that. But the more that we can understand and challenge our assumptions and our workers' imagined view, then the better. And I think just not seeing that as a frontline, people with the boots and the hard hats type of issue. This is everywhere in our organization.
Yeah.
There's a shortage of lightsabers.
No, they took them
particularly on
away.
this.
They
Oh,
lost their lightsaber privileges. We know what you did last night.
We've used up all the questions on the first topic. Are you seeing experiences that are different than what we've
There we go.
brought up?
There it is.
All right.
The force is strong with this one. Throw it. Why get patted once if you're not going to throw it?
It's a good point. I probably won't catch it. All right, I have to figure out how this thing operates. So let me turn this off too. It's like Kmart. Do you remember
It's
Kmart?
intense.
Right? Green light special. So when you're talking about this information that this expertise. So workers have their expertise, managers have their expertise, yes, the C-suite has their expertise, right? I wonder if part of the issue is the silo of that expertise and that information. So I'm wondering what you think about this idea of, you just said we should use the same questions we use on workers to get data about and their stories about how they do their work, right? And then we'll do that at the management level and we'll do that at the C-suite level. But how does their answers to those questions get between those different silos? Because if they understand each other's context better and understand, this is why we have this rule. The manager can explain why we have this rule. Sometimes workers have no idea. And then they go and break the rule and you're like, oh, you dummy. It's like, well, they didn't, right? They didn't understand the importance of it. Like in my organization, they just finally released some financial information from the top that would have put into context a lot of the cuts and a lot of the stuff they've done to faculty in a way that we probably wouldn't have hated administration quite as much. So I think it's really unfortunate that it's so siloed that information didn't get between the groups, right?
So, yes, if only someone was writing a dissertation about joint activity.
I thought you'd finished.
He may be defending it for 2 weeks, this
Almost
hypothetical
Dr.
human being.
Nearly
Uh,
Dr.
No, 100%. And I think this is where, so some of the underlying literature from resilience engineering, I think becomes extremely valuable because, Dave Woods, Eric Kolnick will talk about seeing organizations, people, groups, things like that as joint cognitive systems. And what you want to do is create effective coordination and joint activity in that joint cognitive system. And so, yes, we want to do that. How do we do that? One of the ways is increasing observability, right? So if I can see what you are doing, I can start to orient myself to be able to deal with, hey, yours looks like you're having some difficulties. I may need to pay more attention. I may need to adjust what I'm doing to support you. Often organizations, actually, where I first found this is in disaster research. You see it all the time where people withhold information because they're worried about panic and silly things like that. When in reality, they're actually causing more harm. And that's, I think, an extreme example of what we're talking about. We often hide stuff from people because we don't think we can trust them with the information. And when in fact, giving people bad information makes them make bad decisions, and which reinforces our belief that they're not trustworthy. Right. And that's just a huge mistake. So if we can start to increase transparency where it makes sense, there's times where we can't. I mean, I'm in a business where, I got I've lost count of how many NDAs I have. So I get it, but where we can increase transparency, where we can create common ground within our organization, with our other stakeholders. Like one of the things I'm thinking about is with our customers, how can I create an environment where they can show me what's going on in their organization, the pressures they're dealing with, so that I can help orient to respond to that. Because all I'm seeing is they come to me with an unreasonable ask. And I'm like, well, screw you, Cindy Lou, we're not doing that. When if they just said, hey, here's the reason why we need this, I'd be like, oh yeah, totally. That makes sense. We can do that. Or I can't do what you're asking, but I can do this other thing that's equally good. So increasing transparency, increasing observability, I think is an important part of this.
See a lightsaber way in the back. It's either the coffee carafe, someone hidden there with them.
God, I hope it's the coffee.
So I wanted to challenge some of the conversation because the precepts that you're talking about are essentially for self-aware organizations. What about the organization that has grown into its processes organically and doesn't necessarily recognize the weaknesses structurally within their processes and or, fails to see that there are actually, better ways of achieving whatever the results are? When we're talking about, the team of local experts, what if at the various levels, we've got folks who have even altogether a very incomplete perspective on, work as planned, work as executed, or the potential for it?
I think, Dave, you speak to this sometimes about, those conversations about how innovative do we want to be as an organization? If the answer is we don't want to innovate, we don't want to change, then it's just fear, intimidation, ridicule that's going to get us there. I mean, I don't.
The dark side.
Yeah. Do you want to?
Yeah, look, I think a few comments. I think it's a great point about how aware is the organization of what it doesn't know, and how curious is the organization about what it doesn't know. And I think there's some big problems in management science about these management theories like managed by exception. So if nothing's wrong, nothing's wrong. And I think a lot of managers in organizations, because they're so busy these days, that if it's a green light, then that's a green light on a dashboard, then I actually don't need to pay any attention to this. And I'll just focus on the stuff that is obviously broken and needing attention. So I think one of the things that we need to do as practitioners is, try to amplify the volume of some of the weak signals that we might be seeing that we think the organization needs to pay attention to. But the organization in itself, when I say the organization, leaders or managers or decision makers in the organization, may not be as curious or as aware that there's things that need attention. So I think that's a great thing for us to think about, is how are we making our organizations more curious about what's happening when nothing's happening.
Yeah, I thought that for you. But no, I was talking about Ben, not Dave. Dave's super smart. Ben's
Wow.
Escalated quickly, didn't it? So moving on.
No, so I will say, in my organization, I don't have everybody bought in. I actually don't have most people bought in. And yes, it would help if everybody was like, Ron, yes, let's do this, Ron. I love everything you're doing. If everyone agreed with me, it would be a wonderful place. Beautiful. Full of
If it weren't for the people.
puppy dogs and ice cream.
If it weren't for the people. it'd be good.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So the way I approach this, when I have a situation, like literally, like I was on a phone call just before this, dealing with a situation similar to what you're talking about, a very entrenched part of my work. A longer story than we need to get into. The way I approach it is, okay, what are my leverage points to make change? And the way I think we make change, in like a fundamental principle of what we're talking about with all this, is that you give people better information, they make better decisions. And often people are responding to pressures and conflicts and incentives that are built into the system. And so I'm not going to try to change these people's minds. It's A, it's unlikely to work. B, it's even unlikely to be effective, even if it did work. I'm going to try to change the information environment around them, give them different information, give them alternatives to the choices that they're making, and then just, chip away at it. And yeah, it can be frustrating and it takes forever, but to me, it's either that or I throw my hands up. That's the way I kind of think about it.
And I think
I'll offer a little dumber perspective on that sense. I'm here for it. Dave's point, if it's green on a dashboard, I don't need to pay attention to it. And I think what happens is we sort of chase indicators a lot of times. And backing up, not just indicators and targets, but asking safety performance or organizational performance questions. Because me choosing an indicator may be meaningless, right? How am I going to have somebody buy into any of this if they don't have weigh-in to the process, right? If they're co-creating, it's hard to look at it later and go, I hate that thing that I helped develop. So if we're asking leaders, what would it take? Would it be easier to make this decision if you had this, if I could give you this information, does that make your work better, stronger, faster? And if it doesn't, stop giving them the information. I think for leaders, a lot of times they hear us just creating noise for them, and they don't need that. And whether we think that the question is valid that they're asking is sort of irrelevant, right? I have to start there. I can give them information to make an intelligent decision. Whether I love the question or not doesn't make sense. I need to get them on board with that. And then we can keep building, but we're building that trust, right?
Yeah.
And utility, really.
Yeah.
That
So-
was really smart.
So I think in terms of
Shockingly, I blacked out for a little bit. Did anything happen?
So I think in terms of this idea, we sort of talked for today about, how we can extend these ideas to be more, more useful in this idea of local expertise. I think in this conversation, for me at least, the evolution of this idea of local expertise is some principles that, every person in the organization has something very useful to contribute in terms of understanding how the organization functions. We need to think more about work coordination than just kind of like learning for the purpose of coordination, not learning because learning's a nice word. And then really thinking about how do we get information to flow freely, fast, transparently up and down our organization and across our organization. Because I think that's going to make us better able to manage things proactively rather than wait for the fire and the explosion and the emergency services.
Can I just say that this side's coming through?
They are doing well.
They're really-
Absolutely.
Like nailing it?
It's a marathon,
Back
not a
to
sprint.
sleep?
It's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
And what
Coffee
they're really doing is because I've chosen a topic, they're just trying to kind of slow roll this so I don't.
So you don't get to
Yeah,
talk.
I don't get some, yeah.
Yes.
So on the topic of green light KPIs, we say you're talking about, we look at them, we're like, great, everything's great. Moving on to the red light stuff, the problems, right? So something, I don't know who this might help, but something I've been normalizing in my teams is, wow, you had a great day today and nothing happened. And usually we just say, great, moving on with my day. But I've been challenging them to say, well, it wasn't an accident that today went well. So what went right? So I can continue that in the future. And I've been starting to see a change in my teams where they're starting to be more proactive by paying attention to, wow, nothing happened today. Why? This is great. Okay, what can I do again? So.
How do we do that? And I'll tell you what, you push that up to leaders and managers too, and they will be stunned for a little while, which is good. Building a little curiosity. Logan, will you take us back to the pack there?
The final countdown?
The final countdown. I said that I was that I had chosen best practice. 48% of folks here, first-time attendees. Again, I don't know if you see this, but there is this push, and I think maybe less now than there used to be, but a push to try to proceduralize everything that we can. It makes it look like we care, which is cool, right? There is, I mean, there is
nothing.
there
It's
is
not
not
nothing.
nothing. There is output, right? We've done something. And we can shout safety or operations or whatever. But I think if we're at the same time advancing this idea that safety and resilience and reliability live within systems that are often complex, that we also have to reckon with the fact that best practice doesn't work in a complex setting, and it actually pushes us further away from stability. Now, if I work in the toothpaste factory and my job is screw the lid on the toothpaste, that's pretty simple, predictable work. Like if someone dies, There's problems afoot at the two.
What lids are you putting on?
I know, this is big stuff. I think, there's best practice for that. It's a checklist. And it's pretty simple stuff, but I think as we get past that to this realm of expertise, in organizations, we get really nervous letting experts do expert stuff. And what's weird is that we hire people and we write in the job description, creative problem solving, self-starter, adaptable. And then as soon as they're hired and through new hire training, we're like, just shut up and color and follow the best practice because we didn't mean, right? So it's really a reflection of trust in our own hiring process.
Creatively follow the rules.
Creatively, just be creative in your emotions while I tell you.
I'd like you to be really excited about shutting up and doing your job.
So I think there is space. If you're a fan of, we're talking about Cynefin, which is spelled, unless you're Welsh, is spelled just horribly.
I think it's still spelled horribly.
It's
if you're
yeah,
Welsh. I gotta
amazing.
be honest.
It's you'll never spell it phonetically, but ask a neighbor, maybe they've seen it. If you're a fan of Cynefin, Dave Snowden's frameworks of a sense making model. He talks about simple or obvious systems, sometimes or clear systems. And that's that area of best practice. It really only works in that setting. And as soon as things get complicated, not even complex, just complicated, lots of parts and pieces, we need experts to do it. And that's good practice. And that's what we see in our organizations when experienced folks say, I know what the rule says. But sometimes I vote myself out of the office and I'm out with these guys and they're digging a trench in downtown Boston. And I don't know if you've been to downtown Boston, but it's terrifying without an excavator. And then when you're meant to be in the middle of traffic, there's no slowing of traffic. They just go, it's fine. It'll work itself out. It's Boston. So we'll just shout at one another. And they're digging this trench. And there are rules to digging trenches, shocking. But it's very old. You don't know where things are. There's wooden gas lines under the street in Boston, which I think will make you feel really comfortable about Boston as a city. Old, very old, wouldn't get, so they say, well, I can't dig with the excavator like you've told me to do. Because if I do, I'm going to smash this thing. So our choice is break the rule or be creative in solving the rule. Now, what will happen when something goes wrong? Yeah, I'll be blamed. I'll be told it was a workaround. I was skipping the process and the procedure. I didn't follow best practice for the work. And the reality is it's complex. There is no best practice.
And I think the evolution of this idea is well-intentioned. I think it's absolutely well-intentioned. This proceduralization of work is well-intentioned. It's like we want work to be more reliable and we want to support people to know how to do something. Really kind of helpful thing to think about. And I'm just seeing the book down here from Tony Mashar and Jim Moranis and Ron Farrisee. There are moments in work where people are, it's a critical step. People are immediately, irreversibly, intolerably exposed to harm, like jumping out of a plane without a parachute on, right? And there's risk important actions that we want to be highly reliable. And these rely on people to perform their work in a certain way at that point of time to manage the risk. And in those contexts, that's where our 100% of our focus for best practice should be. And everything else is in the margin where people should be able to figure out, they don't need help to know where to park a car and, how to tie their shoelaces and how to put a seat and how to put a seatbelt on. But, we need to direct our effort to the moments in tasks that need that
Sort of a
support,
difference between
that
rules
support.
and boundaries, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, boundaries, choke points in work. What are those points that we actually need to focus all of our attention on because they're critical.
Well, yeah, and I think your point is really, really critical. I know we have like 50 seconds here. This is like really intense right now. I'm in a lot of pressure.
Hurry up.
Don't let us slow you down.
We're here as long as you need.
The idea like, we have these cardinal rules and you just have to follow them. That's the best practice. It puts all the focus on like the problem is the decision making in the individual, not did we create a context around those individuals to get that outcome that we want, to make it easy, right? And I think that's Yeah, 20 seconds to spare. All I have to say about that.
Yeah. And Logan, if you'll put up, I think, slide with our contact information on it, which very clearly says.
Did you have to put this?
Mr. Almost Dr. Ron Gantt didn't fit, on the slide. It's true.
ABD.
It's really close, dangerously close. Direct all questions to Ron.
We should.
He's got a lot of time.
Thank you, gentlemen. We have ended